An RPG-300 anti-tank weapon was found in the office of the director of Al-Shifa hospital in the Gaza Strip. Hundreds of terrorists have been arrested, while dozens of others were neutralized in exchanges of fire with IDF troops who continue to operate in the compound. Elsewhere, a cruise missile fired from the Iranian-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen fell near the Israeli city of Eilat. And what is the story with the hunger in Gaza? Let's dive into the truth. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report about what is happening in Israel on the 165th day of Israel's war against Hamas and Hezbollah. According to the IDF spokesperson's unit, so far dozens of terrorists have been eliminated in the operation at Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza City, while about 300 individuals suspected of involvement in terrorism have been arrested. The search of the hospital has also revealed large stockpiles of weapons and ammunition, including an RPG missile, a Kalashnikov rifle, cartridges, and bullets in a room next to the office of the hospital director. Dozens of permanent Hamas and Islamic Jihad terrorists have been arrested by the IDF soldiers during the search of the hospital. It is important to note that these terrorist leaders were planning and directing attacks against Israelis in Judea and Samaria, as well as inside Gaza, and this is the reason the hospital is being searched in the first place. These terrorists who were arrested have been and will continue to be thoroughly investigated, and the information they provide will be used to go find and arrest other terrorists and otherwise disrupt their attacks against Israelis. Please pay special attention to the connection between the Gaza arena and the situation in Judea and Samaria. Hamas has been trying for years to establish a stronger presence in Judea and Samaria at the expense of both Israel and the Palestinian Authority. To learn more about this subject, please tune in to this weekend's latest episode of my series, My State. We will be talking about Judea and Samaria and its relationship to the rest of Israel. Back to the news. In the last 24 hours, reports emerged from Palestinian sources that Abu el-Nur el-Bayomi, the Nuseirat police chief, was killed in an airstrike on a vehicle near the UNRWA headquarters in the refugee camp in the center of the Gaza Strip. During the raid on the Al-Shifa hospital, as mentioned, many weapons were found among other supplies, including gift baskets for funds intended for distribution to terrorist operatives. These gift baskets were intended for Hamas and Islamic Jihad operatives with cash, and on them the inscription, "Congratulations on the action." One of the terrorists arrested in the raid by the IDF and Shin Bet forces said that he escaped at the height of the maneuver from the eastern neighborhood of Gaza City to its western side. There he waited for an opportunity to find a hiding place in the central hospital in the Gaza Strip, not far from the beach. It's also important to mention that 3 months ago, the IDF forces swept the Al-Shifa hospital and destroyed several terrorist tunnels that had been dug underneath and around it. They then withdrew, leaving it to the civilian administration that had been running it before the war started. But as soon as the IDF forces moved out, hundreds of terrorists like this detainee moved in, rushing to find shelter in the civilian building. Those seeking to use the hospital and its staff, not to mention the patients there, as human shields, included senior Hamas field commanders. Look, many of these field commanders have been captured in this sweep of the hospital, and they're talking to the IDF intelligence at this very moment. One of those arrested was asked if he had expected the IDF to return to the hospital, and he replied, "If I had known you would come back, I would not have come here." As soon as I heard the tanks and the military at the night, and the shooting outside, I realized that I would leave this place dead or as a prisoner. It is not for nothing that the arrested terrorists had a hard time deciding whether to fight or to try and escape. The IDF's operation at the hospital with the fighters of the Shayetet 13 and Duvdevan alongside the fighters of Givati and the 401st Armored Brigade who are closing in from the outside is highly sophisticated combination of forces of many units working together in sync. This included a complex diversion operation that was planned for this operation and was ongoing for weeks as the IDF studied the habits of the Hamas terrorists inside the hospital, monitoring their electronic communications and taking into account a key element in the planning of the operation when the operatives in the hospital are less alert. All this planning played off as Hamas guards patrolling around the hospital and the cameras they'd set up to monitor the area did not detect the stealthy arrival of the Navy commandos from Shayetet 13. It took place around at 1:30 in the morning. Soon, the time for stealth was over and the new wheeled APCs of the Nahal Patrol, called the DETAINS, charged in to surround the hospital and prevent any terrorists from escaping. Although taken by surprise, the Hamas terrorists quickly opened fire on the IDF troops, the forces eliminated by sniper and silent attack drones who were waiting for them. By this time, the perimeter had been secured, the escape routes had been closed off, and in less than an hour, Merkava 4 chariot tanks of the 401st Brigade and the Namer APCs of the Givati Brigade and the Nahal commandos moved in on foot. They quickly began to identify terrorists along the large number of civilians inside the hospital using advanced detection technologies. Some terrorists refused to be taken alive, and the fighting quickly moved inside the hospital. Brigade 401 fighters found intelligence materials in the hospital, including relatively new laptops and documents belonging to Hamas, proving that Hamas has used the hospital to set up a new headquarters, hoping that the IDF will not return to it. RPGs and AK-47 rifles were also found there, and the army does not rule out the possibility that additional terrorists are pretending to be patients or medical staff. Another point I'd like to emphasize is that all the food and medical equipment being supplied to the hospital is coming from the IDF. This is done so that the hospital can continue to serve its intended purpose of providing medical care to Gazan civilians. It's also important to note that Gazan civilians who had taken shelter in nearby buildings have also been evacuated to safer areas in the city. This raid on Shifa Hospital specifically illustrates the meaning of the third phase of the fighting, the end of the maneuver, what is sometimes called mopping up operations, which follow the destruction of the enemy's main combat units. We know that most of the organized brigades Hamas had at the beginning of the war have been destroyed, with only a few left in Deir el-Balach and Rafah. In practical terms, about 70% of the Hamas force in the northern Gaza Strip was severely damaged or destroyed in the second phase. What's left is scattered and disorganized pockets of Hamas operatives trying to continue fighting without guidance or support from the larger organization. However, the IDF will need to return to Hamas strongholds to confront these remaining pockets of terrorist activity in order to prevent them from reorganizing. In preparation for the continuation of the operation, the IDF does not rule out that the forces will return to the Shifa hospital for a third time in the coming months, and perhaps more times in the year to come. There is no one to fill the power vacuum that Hamas has left behind, and therefore Hamas can be expected to continue trying to re-establish itself in these areas. But the IDF reaches everywhere. It is a fact that Hamas terrorists thought that Shifa was safe for them to hide in, but the IDF was able to quickly prove them wrong when the time came to move in. This is another step in the defeat of Hamas. It will lead to another and another until the elimination of this terrorist organization and everything it represents. May God protect us from Hamas and all terrorists. Please help us spread the truth by sharing our videos on YouTube and following us on social media. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel. Hit the button below and spread the truth with us. And don't forget to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Now back to the Gaza Strip and the battle in the Hamad neighborhood of Khan Yunis. This neighborhood was an outpost of luxury in the Gaza Strip, reserved for senior officials and their families. But now, the Maglan unit of the IDF is rooting these terrorist leaders out of their nest. Many of these leaders have been arrested, others have been eliminated, and the large stocks of weapons and ammunition, as well as intelligence materials, have been seized. The IDF is moving carefully, using precise intelligence and air support, trying to do the minimum amount of damage to the neighborhood while eliminating the Hamas terrorists it contains. The use of drone in close coordination with ground forces allows for the fighting to be contained and also quickly concluded. Finally, we need to talk about the food situation in Gaza. I hear many voices in the world media screaming that the Palestinians are starving. Let's take a moment to focus on this narrative about famine, because this is a heavy word which hits Westerners hard when they hear it. Israel is good at many things, but there's one area we're not good at, and this is telling our side of the story. The Palestinians have become masters of propaganda, telling the world media their own narrative and making them believe it. The more the Palestinian narrative spreads and is believed, the more pressure is put on Israel. But it's not the truth. In the past 2 weeks, an average of 102 food trucks enter the Gaza Strip every day, with an emphasis on trucks carrying food compared to 70 food trucks that entered Gaza on average per day before the start of this war. In other words, this is an increase of about 50% in the amount of food trucks that enter into the Gaza Strip every day in recent weeks, compared to the average amount per day before the war started. I almost forget to mention that a cruise missile from the direction of Yemen hit Israel on Sunday, falling in an open area north of Eilat. This is the first cruise missile to hit Israel without being intercepted. So please continue to support us so that we can bring you the truth of what is happening in Israel and the Middle East. The war is still ongoing on multiple fronts. We have Hezbollah and Iran from the north, we have Hamas in the West Bank, we have Hamas in the Gaza Strip, we have the Houthis in Eilat in the south. We need your help. We know that we will win because God is on our side, but please help us spread the truth of what is happening in Israel and the Middle East, and most importantly, please pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.